Hey, I'm Hannah, and today I'm going to talk about dating with type 1 diabetes. I am a doctor with type 1. I've had type 1 for 20 years now. I was diagnosed at age 13, and so basically all of my dating years I went through living with, learning about, and explaining type 1 diabetes in relationships. And I just got engaged to my boyfriend of 3 years, and lately I've been thinking a lot about this idea of dating with type 1, and I've seen a lot of people ask questions. So today we're going to go over, what does it look like to date with type 1 diabetes? How do you talk about it? How do you tell someone when you're first getting to know them? Do you feel like people are discouraged from dating you because of your type 1 diabetes? And these are all great questions, I think, that are normal and natural for people as we grow up with type 1 diabetes and we don't know what it looks to do this. So today I'm going to talk about my personal experience with it. I had my fair share of dates and relationships before my current relationship, and each one of them, I never felt like type 1 diabetes really got in the way or was too much of a disadvantage that put stress on a relationship. I think I'm really lucky for feeling that, but I also worked on my mindset and my own relationship with type 1 diabetes before I went into these relationships. And so that probably helped. I also erred on the side of, you can see my pups playing back here, that's pretty cute. I also erred on the side of independence with type 1 diabetes. So I really did a lot of my type 1 diabetes care on my own and didn't put much of that burden on the person I was in the relationship with. And I think that really helped too, because it was something that was really up to me and a part of my own self-care. But really, I think just take a step back. Let's talk about how type 1 diabetes can be perceived in a relationship. And I think this is an important question because it was my first fear before I started dating, that I would have people who didn't want to date me because I had type 1 diabetes. And that is so common. I know I'm not the only one to think that or have that thought cross their minds. Now, I did not ever run into that in real life. I certainly ran into meeting people or getting to know people who didn't know a thing about type 1 diabetes and didn't understand it when they first met me. And so that brought questions up for them, but it never felt like it was a deterrent. Now, can I say that there were people who maybe weren't interested in me because of my type 1 diabetes that never told me? Sure, that could have absolutely happened. But I think it's this nice filter because what I want, and I think what is a very healthy approach to life, is to have, they're so cute back here. That's so funny. Is a healthy approach to have is curiosity and to not make assumptions about people before we get to know them. Like, we don't want to judge a book by its cover. So if for some people, type 1 diabetes had this stereotype that felt negative to them and they didn't want to ask me about it, they didn't want to learn about it, they didn't want to find out whether or not their assumptions about it were true or not, then maybe that's not the right person I was going to fit with long term for that reason anyway. So perhaps type 1 diabetes had a filter for me that was helpful. I can't say that I really know that. I'm sure that there were different things that crossed people's minds along the journey. But what I do know from the people that I have dated is that when they found out I had type 1 diabetes, learning about it and understanding it in a way that was maybe whole from the beginning, that didn't leave a lot of questions in their mind of what if I was able to give answers to what came up for them in a way that was knowledge-based, then they often were able to take down their negative assumptions of it pretty quickly, and it just wasn't a problem after that. So really, I think there were 3 steps that I've written out that were helpful for me with that kind of process of getting to know someone with type 1 diabetes. The first was just my own confidence about it. And this goes back to what I said, is that type 1 relationship that I had personally. Me feeling confident in my own body, that I knew how to take care of myself. Me feeling confident that I was going to have a good, happy, healthy life with type 1 diabetes, and I could give that to someone, or I could share life with someone that would be able to take on that mindset with it as well. And confidence in my ability to figure out my type 1 diabetes in different chapters of life as my needs changed. So confidence was huge, because I think that as people, and of course this is my own perspective, but as people read my own confidence, it took down their worries. Like, oh, this is something that we can feel clear about. It doesn't have to have all this unknown. Anytime we have unknown in human psychology, it's so natural to fill it with fears. And so taking out that and having confidence about like where I am with it, that I'm going to be able to figure it out in the future, that this is what it means right now, that clarity was helpful. I think the second thing was knowledge and self-sufficiency. So not just believing that I had that, but also actually having it. It doesn't mean at all that I had perfect blood sugar control. That wasn't inconvenient at times, not at all, but I had enough knowledge to keep myself safe, to keep myself at a place where I could take care of myself. I could treat a low and feel confident that I was going to be safe about it. I could treat highs. I was able to really take care of my own health and feel sufficient, self-sufficient in doing that. Doesn't mean that I didn't ask for help or didn't learn things from other people, but it really just means that I felt like I could take care of myself and that I wasn't going to put a lot of daily tasks. That was my low alarm. So I'm going to pause this and I'll be right back. But it really just means to me that I was able to take care of myself most of the time. So I wasn't asking the person that I was in a relationship with to be taking care of me every day. I didn't have all these tasks that I was putting on them. I wasn't putting pressure on them to make sure that I wasn't going too low or too high. I really took that on myself. And I think that was a healthy way to have a relationship with type 1 diabetes, where I was really taking accountability for my own self-care. And then the third component was communicating. So having the confidence to be able to feel like I was going to have a good life with diabetes, the confidence to learn that So the third piece is communication. So basically being able to explain all that in a way that would make sense to someone without a full background in type 1 diabetes. And so what I would do is really just look at making sure it was something we could talk about, being really open about, do you have any questions about this? Does it bring up any concerns we can talk about? I want to make sure that you have all the information you need to feel good about it. So being able to explain that and take time. I think it's probably worse if we don't talk about it at all, because then it goes back to leaving room for the unknown that we discussed and how that can leave space for negative assumptions. So step one, confidence and believing in ourselves to live a happy, healthy life and be a good partner, be able to show up in a way that is supportive, where we're not just living in this fight or flight mode trying to take care of ourselves. 2, having the knowledge and self-sufficiency and accountability to take care of ourselves for the most part, really wanting to take that on so that we're not asking someone that we're with to do a lot of taking care of ourselves in that way. I think that's really important. And then 3, having the ability just to take time to communicate about it and having it as an open thing that can be talked about, and having questions that can come up and things that can be discussed, and being able to go back and forth about it. And I think that's good. I think that's what keeps it healthy, being open for feedback from your person. I think that's important too. So that would be the big picture. Now, I would say that it's going to look different every time. I can think about, relationships at the very beginning of dating where I had someone ask me if type 1 diabetes was contagious. And that's funny now, or it was funny to me then too. But if you had no idea and you had never heard of this type 1 diabetes thing, it's okay to ask that. I think that there's so much health knowledge, and it's not anybody's fault we don't get a whole lot of solid health education. And so it's not expected that everybody's going to know what type 1 diabetes is in the beginning. And then I've definitely had a common question from people I was dating is, what does that mean for you? Are you going to end up in the hospital a lot? Are you going to be able to have children? That kind of thing. There are all these questions questions, make sure you know those answers for yourself first. But yeah, absolutely. It's normal for those questions to come up. It doesn't mean that they're stigmatizing you. It just means that they're curious sometimes. And then really looking at later on in life, and with my fiance now, on our first date, we went on a walk. And I remember it was this kind of beautiful trail around Austin on the river, and it was a good date. So we ended up walking longer than we initially anticipated. And so of course I had low snacks, but I remember on that kind of towards the end of our date, blood sugar had started dropping and I was going to have to eat my low snack, which is at the time what I talked about in a previous video, or like these little boxes of raisins. And I realized that he didn't know I had type 1 diabetes, and I was going to have to tell him because I didn't want to share my raisins with him, and I didn't want him to think I was just having a snack and not sharing it, which is so funny now. But so I did that. So I pulled him out and I said, hey, I'm going to have this snack that I brought because my blood sugar is running a little bit low, and I have type 1 diabetes, so sometimes that happens when I'm doing exercise for an unknown amount of time. And I just explained it to him, and he was like, oh, wow, that's interesting. Tell me more about it. And he was curious. That doesn't always happen. But then I was just able to give him my story with type 1 diabetes, is that it's an autoimmune disease. I was diagnosed when I was a teenager, and it's something I've lived with for a long time, and I've learned a lot from it, and it's brought some good into my life from the lessons I've learned. It definitely keeps me motivated and inspired to stay healthy with my choices, and it's, allowed me to get into this career of medicine and really inspired me there. And I just told my story, and that worked. And then he was like, oh, that's cool. That's a cool thing, is that you had a challenge, you figured it out, and now these are the things that you have to do in life around it. And it wasn't a huge deterrent, I think, because of the way I explained it. I fully believe, and again, this is totally my opinion, but I believe if in that situation I were to have said something like, oh, I have diabetes and it totally sucks and it takes away this from my life and it makes this worse and it's so hard because I have to do all these extra things, then that mentality would have been hard to be around. I think anytime we're really negative about something that we can't change in our life, is it creates a negative mood that is recurrent. So if that's a family member you don't like that you're complaining about, or something else, that your height that you're complaining about, like, it's just not, if there's something in our life that we can't change, our only choice is to have a improved perspective with it in order to feel better. And so I do think that perspective makes a big difference. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't times in our life now where I haven't figured out my basal rate for that chapter, and I come in and I'm like, oh, I had 3 lows last night, I'm so frustrated. Or I say, I'm really upset at him for something, and then my meter goes off, or my CGM goes off, and my blood sugar is a little bit high, and we both know that maybe I'm more frustrated because of that, on top of everything else going on. And so those things happen, and it's okay. I think it's important to be mindful of them. But I know that the way that you present your own relationship with type 1 diabetes makes a difference. And the way that you explain it to people makes a difference. And if we come off as offensive, like, how dare you not know what type 1 diabetes is, or how dare you have a negative assumption, like it's contagious, is interesting. But it's those things, like if we're upset about those things, that's gonna show that we are upset with something about type 1 diabetes within us. So I think dating is easy and fine if you have a good relationship with type 1 diabetes. I think if we don't have a great relationship with type 1 diabetes, it's going to make dating harder, if that makes sense. So maybe start with self-love and self-care and your relationship with type 1 diabetes first. And then just practice talking about it in a positive way. Practice answering questions about it. I think that it's helpful if someone hasn't asked you directly, if you have type 1 diabetes, does it mean all your children are going to have type 1 diabetes? You can say that. That was something that came up for you as a worry. You can say, yeah, I have type 1. It's not something that's going to be passed down necessarily to all my family. There's a genetic component, but it's not fully genetic, meaning that not everybody in my family has it. You could say, hey, it means that sometimes I have to eat extra snacks or take extra insulin, this hormone I don't make anymore, but it doesn't mean that I can't do fun activities. I still love going on hikes and going camping and doing all this adventurous stuff, if that's true for you. And so it's good to explain it in context of how it impacts the big picture of who you are, because that allows someone to say, oh, okay, this person's really got their life figured out and they're clear on their intentions and they're going to have a good life, and then they can decide if they want to be part of it or not. And it doesn't make diabetes this kind of unknown. That is my puppy with her squeaky toy in the background of this video, which would have been perfect for my perfectionism video that I just recorded, but here we go. So I hope this was helpful. I'm sure this will come up with questions. If you have questions, please let me know in the comments. If you haven't liked or subscribed, that would mean a whole lot to me. And if you haven't already, check out the description box for further resources. Thanks so much for being here. Bye.